Hey everyone, let's take a look at the Alfheim world map today, which is the fantasy world provided in ICRPG. Now, Alfheim is a fantastic little sandbox because it has a little bit of everything while also leaving plenty of room for DIY and space to tell your own stories and adventures. You could really play in Alfheim for years, playing either the threads and hooks provided in Core, Worlds, or Master Edition, or just telling your own stories in all the different realms. But my hope is to give an overview of each of the realms, what you might find in each, as well as some of the thoughts and things that I've noticed over the years playing in ICRPG. Now the map that I have up on the screen right now is the regional or overview map. It shows the borders of each of the realms, as well as kind of just where they fall within Alfheim. If you look down on the right, you can see the 50-mile scale, and I've done the map, and Alfheim is about 725 miles from east to west, as well as 575 miles from north to south. That's for the main kind of continent. If you look over to Ire and Iridrum, they're about 275 north to south and 150 east to west. And it sounds big, but in reality, Alfheim is quite small. Looking at, something that's more familiar to us, I pull this open and set up a radius of the same size of Alfheim from east to west. And using my home state of Utah, this is about as big as Alfheim is. For relation, it's about the entire northeast, about the size of Mexico, or if you want to, scroll up, it's about the size of Alaska, which, again, it's quite small. But I think that's a benefit or a boon to Alfheim. It's not so expansive that you couldn't reasonably get anywhere. Everything's kind of within reach within a few days or from traveling or whatever. But it's kind of, everything's accessible, which I really like. Then diving into the realms itself, you can see that we've got, let me actually switch over to the real map instead of the overview map, which provides a ton more detail. Now we're going to start up here in the top left of Ire. So Ire is a kind of rocky, snowy place. It's a highland where you kind of need a guide to explore around. There's not a lot of settlements here. You've got, places like Pinehenge and Solstice Peak and the Warden, a few towns. But this place is kind of a realm of giant beasts and primals. So if you want to travel here, you're going to need a guide and you're going to need to take provisions and be prepared for the wild spaces of the world. Then on the southern side of the isle, you've got Iridrum. You have the Kinder Peaks kind of separating the two split realms. You've got Norberg at the bottom. This place was updated with Master Edition, and it has been destroyed. It's a realm of rubble because Durathrax has come into the mountains and ruined things. It used to be bountiful and beautiful and the kind of oldest settlement of dwarves, but now it's just kind of a wreck. There's still heroes and the dwarves gather together, but this realm of heroes is seeing some tough times. Then you can come over to Ket, which is over here. And this place is kind of like a high desert. Rather than sandy dunes and what you might find in like the Sahara, this is kind of a barren wasteland with lots of wind and plateaus. There's nomadic folk that travel, and distance is definitely a killer. You can see that, there's really not a lot of settlements, and the people that do settle here are nomadic, so they might move from place to place. So traveling from Newell to Port Sand could be treacherous indeed. Then coming down here, you have Kath, which is the Tomb of Snakes. A more classic desert. This is where you have the dune sea, lots of sand, lots of heat. You've got, those elements there, as well as you've got on the southern side a series of jungles. You've got a lot of undead remnants and remnants of the serpent folk from the Second Age. And so you've got a lot of details there to play with. Then going back up to the north, you have Nordheim, which is the Endless Woods, a huge realm of forest and pine. You can travel through the forests, confront, snow orcs, goblins, outcasts, escape pit fighters, the lot, as well as you've got plenty of ports. You've got ports here, ports here, ports here, ports here. So you can travel by sea anywhere, within Alfheim within a few days, or from Nordheim. Then above that, surrounded by mist and fog, is Aphos, or Aphos. It's a refugee of the elf. This is the elven home. Shrouded by fog, it's full of ancient wealth and mystery. There's kind of a lot of secrecy and history with the elves for obvious reason. Then you've got here in the center, we've got Grey, which is the kind of heart of Alfheim. It's bordered by a lot of different realms. You've got the city fortress of Grey here in the center with, King Henrik. You've got forests, you've got mountains, you've got cities, a lot of spaces for classic adventures, and, a lot of room to play in just Grey. Then right here kind of in the middle, you have Numidia, which is the rocky foothills, kind of the home of the barbarians and the clan wars that are going on. The highlands and the forts there and the mountains are such a joy and a fun place to play around with. Especially if you've kind of set up in Grey, you can travel to Numidia and just kind of have a change of pace every now and then. Then right here is you have the Deadlands, which is honestly one of my favorite realms, although you don't get a lot of play in there. It's a noxious swamp. Travel is really difficult. There's a lot of kind of corruption and under the surface kind of evil and stuff to explore. A lot of influence of like Ogdru and things like that, which are fun to play with, as well as kind of a connection to like this, the Bay of Mass down here. Then you've got Xenos, which is a very interesting and intriguing place. It's interesting, intriguing, but also bizarre. It's Starfallen. There's connections and remnants of things from, outer space and the stars there. It's shifting landscape as well as, just a weird place. There's a lot of kind of just strange energies in Xenos. Then kind of zigzagging back up, we've got the Greenway. I like to think of the Greenway as almost Shire-like. You've got a lot of pleasant travel, kind roads, a lot of merchants, a lot of people kind of exploring things. But I also love that the Greenway has a ton of history under the surface. I mean, just when, we'll talk about the history of Englemore and in Westburg, and everywhere you go, just buried under the surface or in the catacombs or wherever, you'll find remnants of times past and the history of it that people have forgotten or choose to ignore. All right, then driving way up to the north, we've got the Shum, which is the goblin home. It's this little kind of safe haven for the goblins, the hinterlands. You've got exaggerated seasons up here because they're so far north. It's this great wall makes it kind of off limit to anyone but goblin folk. And there's just lots and lots of goblin as they kind of live out their lives and their own culture here up in Tashum and keep to themselves because they know it's safer than traveling around. Then you've got Scar, which again is this huge realm up in the northeast. This is a realm of beasts and kind of like, wide open spaces. There's these great buttes jutting into the sky. There's a lot of wind, and I like to think of Scar as kind of the Southwest or the American Southwest, kind of, it's close to home for me in Utah. It's the Red Rock and Zions and Bryce Canyon and all that kind of stuff. That's what I imagine Scar to be like. But you've got a lot of beasts and a lot of exploration there possible. Then you've got down here, you've got Durden, which is kind of like the Dwarven realm, the Dwarven stronghold. You've got Ramthis Rock and Ramthis here and Durmuro as settlements, and there's so much stuff going underneath the surface that you can kind of go through the Dwarven kingdom. You've got the mountains as well, and these large cities, but you also kind of have these volcanoes and these kind of molten mountains here as well, which kind of provides a new space to play in if you're interested in that. It helps the dwarves with their smithing and their crafting, but the ant-men of the molten mountains cause trouble for them. And then coming up again to the northeast, we still have Olo, which is this place here. And Olo is kind of like the frozen hell of the world. It's completely frozen solid. It's covered in ice. This is their your snowy Arctic. You've got the salt frost or the salt flats that are here that can damage your loot, and really make things difficult. There's ice drakes, snow orcs, and snow flimes, which can really highlight if you're interested in like snow icy Arctic games. Come to Olo. As well as there's some highlights for some magic and mystical time manipulation as you explore Castle Manic and some of the things that have been going on in Olo. And then finally up here in the top right is Krask, which is kind of whatever you want. It was purposely left as a kind of a template or an open space for you as a GM to explore and to create, and players to experience whatever you want it to be. It could be an Isle of Evil. It could be abandoned. The previous villain was defeated and no one has touched foot there for 1,000 years. It can, untold treasures. It could be a mega dungeon. Whatever you want. Krask is a open book and a blank page for you to explore. Now, some of the details that I've experienced and noticed is, one, I've played in pretty much all of these realms, and they are a ton of fun. They do highlight different feels, different, the environments. It's so interesting what a little bit of landscape and environment can do to the feel of the adventure. But all of these places are a ton of fun to play in. But I've also noticed that for the most part, players and GMs and what I've just seen in the community stick to the western side of Alfheim, especially Ire and Eardrum. Like this in second edition and world, this was the realm of heroes. A ton of heroes made their start in Eardrum or Norborg or Ire or whatever, and then they would cross over the Emerald Sea and they would end up in Nordheim or Ket or Kath, and you'd end up getting to Grey, and that's kind of where you'd stop. You wouldn't ever really play in Deadlands or the Greenway or Durden. There would be some times, but just for the most part, a lot of play happens on this side. And we talked about it once in the forums that it feels like the western half of Alfheim kind of is the opening or the more accessible area, and you have to kind of work your way and earn your way into these spaces. Through your adventuring, through your connections, you eventually find threads and hooks that kind of pull you from west to east. I've also noticed, again, like not a lot of play happens in Deadlands, although it's a ton of fun and there's a ton of mystery there. Not a lot of people, tackle Krask, although it's a hoot and a half just to play there, just because you can really do whatever you want and introduce so much. But, a lot happens in Grey, a lot happens in Nordheim. And I think those are just so classic to what we imagine for fantasy adventure that's kind of where it is. And, you always want a desert adventure every now and then. So you head down to Kath, and every now and then you want, a seafaring adventure. So you head over to the Emerald Sea or to the ports of Nordheim and whatever. And you want to explore the wilds. You go to Ire, and it is interesting. But I would also encourage that as you look at Alfheim and as you think about things, as we dive into things, like just pick out little details. And this is one of the best parts about this map in particular. And Runehammer just nails this every time he does a map. If you just look at a map and find a detail, something interesting, and use that as the starting point for adventure, you will never be at a loss for something to do. You can always have a hook. You can always have a point of interest, and you can create the breeding ground for new threads and new stories. So for example, let's pick out, one or two, and you could use the references and what they state in the Worlds or Master Edition book, or you can ignore it completely. Like, you can make up your own thing. But let's look at something that I did in Alf Marches was this particular tree here, right? This is a big pine tree, and there's a little door right there at the bottom. And, who knows what that is? Maybe it's a warden. Maybe it's an ancient tree that connects the world, like you find in Ire. What I ended up saying was that this little tree was the home base of the Pine Blood clan of the outcast goblins, one of the clans that have been banished from the Shum. And so these goblins have come, and they've kind of settled in this tree, and they have their little cave, and they gather together, and they were actually recruiting other others, travelers and things, to their cause, saying, hey, we were outcast from Thashun, help us reclaim our homeland, help us fight back against Queen Knife. And this was their home base, and this is where they kind of centered everything, and then they would leave and go hunting and traveling through the forests of Nordheim. And so the Pine Blood clan started from that little tree. Then another one was this little outpost here. I ended up, in Elf Marches, I consider this Splintervale, a little town on the crossroads between Scar and Nordheim and Grey. They get a lot of travelers from all different places. They're kind of a neutral territory with the war with the elves and the goblins and whatever. But I had set them up to be kind of shady. They rule with the city council, and they make deals behind closed doors. And so this little town, while a great neutral place, there's some shady stuff going underneath that. Then let's see, what's another fun detail, something that draws the eye. Just going along here. Go along there. Yeah, so then another one I was a player in is JD Hole from the Runehammer community. He ended up having these, kind of another kind of subclass or subspecies of characters that he introduced into the world. And there's this little tiny hole right there that we thought was, kind of a cool little cave. And we kind of decided that this little, cliff face was the home world, their home, and that we had to work with them to kind of reclaim their space, understand what was going on. And then this, in that little game, became kind of like what we were fighting for as we explored, this town, working with the primals and the strangeness that was going on. Another game was these little rocks here. These we thought were the teeth of Good, which, we ended up having a kind of shipwrecks here. And, we did a solo adventure where I came in and we had to climb aboard onto this wreck, and there was other bandits that were kind of trying to find out the treasures there, and we had a fight or two, and it was just a ton of fun, all just because we thought, these rocks looked really cool. But that's Alfheim, and that's kind of the whole point, is Alfheim has so much to offer. It has so many details within the map, within the notes and threads provided in Master Edition, Core, and Worlds, but it also is just open. I mean, look at this. Look at this space. There's nothing there, but is there? I know for sure there's something there, but is there? I don't know what it is there. So there's room to play, and there's room to explore, and there's room to experience and create in Alfheim, and I love that so much. So if you're interested in a fantasy world, if you're wondering where you could play and just have a good old time, Alfheim is my recommendation. I think if you're looking for fantasy and even connections to sci-fi, there's plenty of opportunities to introduce, connections to Warp Shell. The Wizard's Lock always gives you a place that you could connect to Ghost Mountain, Warp Shell, or any other of the worlds and realms within the Runeverse. If you haven't played in Alfheim, highly recommend it. Take a look, explore, and even if you just stare at this map like I do every now and then, like I'm sure something will come to mind and will spark your imagination and you'll be set to play.